and it's good to be back. It's good to be together. It's good to share. Perhaps appropriate then that we start with one of the really old favorites of choirs, God So Loved the World. We'll follow that in this first group with a hymn, Oh, for a Heart to Praise My God, and then for the beauty of the earth.
God so
for the beauty of the earth, and we tend to think of the beauties visually. But there are beauties in the earth in other ways. A meditation from an Amish farmer's journal. I was walking along the wood's edge when my attention was drawn to a number of small olive-green birds flitting through the blackberry tangles. As I came closer to the rather tame birds, I recognized them as golden-crowned kinglets. Then I noticed a larger, brownish bird in the thick undergrowth. Since I was carrying a fence stretcher instead of binoculars, I waited for the bird to reveal its identity. I didn't have long to wait. As it perched on a thorny cane, I saw that the back of its head and back were brown, and its tail, which it jerked occasionally, reddish. It was a hermit thrush. I was delighted to find one of these, migrating so early, only on the second day of April. The onion snowstorm on the last day of March brought a sudden stop to these early migrants' northward travels, just as it had to our spring fieldwork. The hermit thrush is one of the 5 so-called brown-backed thrushes that migrate through this area in the spring. He's writing in Ohio, by the way. The others are the wood thrush, the Swainsons, and the gray-cheeked thrushes, and the veery. Unlike the other 4, which migrate deep into the tropics, the hermit thrush winters in the southern states and Mexico, and may, although rarely, spend a winter in the north. 2 years ago, we saw one on our Christmas bird count. Understandably, it is the first brown-backed thrush to appear in the spring on its way to northern nesting grounds. The hermit thrush sings what many consider to be the most beautiful of North American bird songs, a song that is comparable, some say, to that of the European nightingales. Unfortunately, it seldom, if ever, sings that exquisite song while migrating. A bird of the Canadian zone, nesting southward only at the higher altitudes of the Rockies and the Appalachians, its song belongs to those who live in or travel to those places. The brown-backed thrushes are not the only thrushes native to the eastern United States and Canada. 2 other members of this family are the eastern bluebird and the American robin. Robins and bluebirds don't have the spotted breasts of the woodland thrushes, but their young do. We're all familiar with young spot-breasted robins hopping around on the lawn, loudly begging their parents for food. Begging may be the wrong word, demanding. As the young reach adulthood, the spots disappear. Beloved by many people, they have, unlike their shyer cousins, become dooryard birds and are considered harbingers of spring. Both birds are able singers. Our eastern bluebird nests as far west as the foothills of the Rockies. From there on, one finds the western and mountain bluebirds, which hardly ever come east of the Great Plains. It has been said that the gentle eastern bluebird carries the blue of heaven on his back and the rich brown of freshly turned earth on his breast. Even though they are more noticeable during the first warm days of spring as the male seeks a nesting mate, the bluebirds are hardy and most likely didn't go very far south for the winter. When spring begins, they return to their summer haunts. Worldwide, there are 306 species of thrushes. Of all these, I rejoice that 3 share our farm with us: the robins about the buildings, the bluebirds in the orchards and the fields, and the wood thrushes in the woods. Last spring, we were making hay in our farthest field, and as sometimes happens, our haying day lasted until dark. As dusk approached, so did a deliberate, sweet, liquid voice, "Ti-ole, ole, ti-ole," drifted gently from the nearby woods. It was the beautiful flute-like song of the wood thrush, neither exultant like the singing of the red-eyed vireo or the orioles, nor as rollicking as the wrens, but peaceful, serene, spirit-lifting. No wonder John Audubon wrote, "How fervently have I blessed the being who formed the wood thrush and placed it in these solitary forests." Our next group is also a group of 3 songs. The first one is Do Not Be Afraid. The second one, My Soul, Triumphant in the Lord. And the third one, a setting of a text by Amy Carmichael, a missionary who spent her entire lifetime saving little girls in India from worse fates than had she not been there. She served for 54 years in the same place without a furlough, starting a work which is still active today.
Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name. You are mine. You are mine. When you walk through the waters, I'll be with you. You will never sink beneath the waves. When the fire is burning all around you, you will never be consumed by the flames. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name. You are mine. You are mine. When the fear of loneliness is looming, then remember I am at your side. When you dwell in the exile of a stranger, remember you are precious in my eyes. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name. You are mine. You are mine. You are mine, oh my child. I am your father, and I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you with a perfect love. soul triumphant in the Lord shall tell its joys abroad, and march with holy vigor, supported by its God, supported by its God. Through all the winding maze of life, His hand has been my guide. And in that long experience, my heart shall still confide. My heart shall still confide. His grace through all the desert flows, an unexhausted stream. That grace in Zion's sacred mount, shall be my endless theme, shall be my endless theme. Love through me, love through me, love through me, love of God. Make me like thy clear air, like thy clear air, through which unhindered colors pass as though it were not burned. Powers of the love of God, depths of the heart divine. Oh, love that faileth not, break forth, and flood this world, and flood this world of thy love of God, love through me.
Apron strings are more or less obsolete, but purse strings are still in style, just as they were that Sunday morning in Mississippi over 150 years ago, when a young school teacher went to a little Pearl River church and was overwhelmingly moved by a missionary's sermon, so much so that when the collection basket reached her pew, she put in a $5 bill and a note reading, "I give $5 and myself, Mary I. McClellan." $5 was a generous gift that long ago. But as for any young woman thinking of going out to a heathen land, unthinkable, unheard of. The Methodist ministers wagged their heads, wondering what on earth to do with Mary. All except Reverend James Lambeth, who soon solved the unsolvable by marrying Mary and taking her along with him to China in the year 1853. The bridegroom's background had been as dramatically handed over to the Lord as the bride's, for he was born while his father was preaching at a camp meeting in Alabama. And the moment the young preacher heard the news, he said, I dedicate this child to God as a foreign missionary, and I vow a bale of cotton to send him with. What more could God want? A boy and a bale of cotton, a girl and $5. When the time came to go, they faced 16,000 miles of weather and choppy seas on a small ship called Ariel, sailing and drifting for 135 days, with the drinking water gone bad and the bread gone moldy long before they rounded the Cape of Good Hope. Moreover, it was winter, and they had to use red-hot cannonballs for warmers. Then came Shanghai. But after so much tedium, it was terrifying to land during the dreadful days of the Taiping Rebellion, with the city in the hands of the rebels. Most women who are going to have a first baby within 2 months of arrival in a strange oriental city with a war going on do not go out on the street and start bringing in dozens of big and little orphans, starving on the sidewalk. But young Mrs. Lambeth was still as determined as ever to give $5 and myself. She housed so many orphans that soon there was no more room. She fed so many that soon there was no more food, and of course no more cash. But because there was plenty of time between meals to teach school to her newfound family, she soon found that she had no books, no slates, no pencils, no paper, no blackboards. It is even quite probable that over in Nashville, her husband's mission board had no more patience with the steady stream of requests arriving by every ship that crossed the sea from Shanghai. There must have been men who shook their heads and said that back there when Mary wrote down $5 and myself, she really meant it, didn't she? And now she wanted them to mean it too. But suppose her house did seem smaller and smaller as the orphans grew bigger and bigger. Was a school the answer? But then drama entered the picture again, for in Nashville, a bride who had just heard about all this suddenly began unpinning all the diamonds which were holding her wedding veil in place. And this first act of the new Mrs. McGavick was sending these precious stones to Mrs. Lambeth in China. They were sold for $1,000. And this first Chinese school built with diamonds was to become the famous McTire School for Girls in the course of time. But meanwhile, in America, other Southern Methodist women felt strangely warmed to think of one brave little woman in wartime with a brand new baby working such wonders so quickly. And if she thought that things should be done in China for children, then why not organize themselves into a Woman's Methodist Foreign Missionary Society on faith? This, too, has kept growing and growing, as you may well know. But what you may not know is that all this time the little Lambeth lad was growing up, tied to his mother's purse strings, watching her work wonders indoors and out. This kind of private practical wonder, the War of 1861 to 65 cut off all Lambeth income from their home base in Nashville. Dr. Lambeth considered taking some other job to support his family, but no, Mary Lambeth solved it all by taking in table boarders, so the mission work need not suffer a single second. Even a son could see that this was still $5 and myself. This myself totally self-forgetful, totally capable of coping with every emergency. For instance, she saw how the Chinese feared an eclipse of the sun. Well and good, the answer she had for this superstition was to sit down and write an astronomy in Chinese. She worried over Chinese women's lily feet, bound and crippled from childhood. That meant starting a crusade. No boy could forget that kind of energy, and when the family was moved to Japan by the mission board, it was easy to see her still giving herself away to the people in Osaka, where the Lambeth Bible School became a memorial to both parents. The sequel of which is that whatever small sons see, they either spurn or share. And Walter Lambeth was as startling a sharer as his mother in the very same fashion. Not only did he become the greatest missionary bishop in China, but he touched life on every one of the major continents, equally at home in Japan, Africa, South America, Europe, generous to a fault, noble and forward-looking. George Bernard Shaw once said that if a cause is to grow, then instruct every woman you meet about it. She will tell her husband. Contradict him with all your own arguments, and a squabble will follow. But all this time the son will be listening and set to thinking if he's capable of thought. And so the minds of people get leavened. In the Lambeth stewardship there was no squabbling, but a bishop was reared by the conversations overheard in his home, until he too could live out Thomas Kelly's Christian dream. We must all be cosmic mothers of all. One more group. Did I bring the wrong piece of paper again? What's the first one?
My prayer.
My prayer. My prayer, 3 stanzas of a prayer, a hymn prayer that appears in many hymn books. It doesn't happen to be in the Adventist hymn book. I wish it were. Followed by, Jesus, these eyes have never seen that radiant face of thine. A hymn that was in the old church hymnal is not in the present one, and I'm sorry. It's a good text. Light divine, a Russian chant, reworked into English. And finally, sometimes a light surprises the Christian when he sings. It is the Lord who rises with healing in his wings.
Give me more strength. I see thee not, I hear thee not, yet art thou all with me. And earth has ne'er so dear a spot as where I meet with thee. Like some bright dream that comes unsought, where slumbers o'er me roll, thine image ever fills my thought and charms my ravished soul. Yet though I have not seen, and still must rest in faith alone, I love thee, dearest Lord, and will unseen, but not unknown. Sent from heaven, thy rays were given on great and small to shine. O light divine, many soul in sorrows night, see the heavenly light, thy blessing to all creation. Lead us to our salvation. All those whose feet may falter, lead unto the sacred altar. Oh, shine from above, divine light of love, show us the way unto our God, we pray. Thou our beacon and guide shalt be. Light divine, we praise thee. Sometimes a light surprises the Christian while he sleeps. It is the Lord who rises with healing in his wings. When comforts are declining, he grants us so again a season of clear shining to cheer it after
Thank you again so much. Our benediction, it comes from Numbers 6, verse 24 through 26. The Lord bless thee and keep thee. The Lord make his face shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace. Amen.